Hello everybody, Steve Griffiths here, developer of the MTPredictor software program. In today's MTPredictor video, I'd like to have a look at the VS setup or volume spike setup in MTPredictor. In particular, what makes up a good VS setup. But as usual, we start with our risk disclaimer. Remind you that all examples in these videos should be considered as hypothetical. No trades are actually taken. They're just shown for illustration and trading purposes only. Remind you there's a risk of loss in trading and investing. Put another way, all professional traders know and understand, but more importantly accept that losses can and will and do unfold. It's an important point. There'll always be losing trades no matter what approach you have to the markets. Right, I want to have a quick look at the 3-minute chart of the ES or the E-mini from yesterday using a day session only chart. This is the 6th of November here, and as you can see we had two VS sell setups here. In fact, both of them were quite good setups, both of them worked out well. They're both on black MTP trend. This first one here, if I place the analysis on, you can see it went down to its first target just for a nice 2-hour profit. Then this second one here was a very nice one that went down to its first profit target for a plus 6.4 hour profit. Remember, we use position sizing to vary the number of lots, contracts or shares. In this way our profits are related to our losses or initial risks rather than just in dollar values. And you see here this was a good profit because it was 6 times greater than the initial risk required to take the trade. I'm not looking at any of the other setups in the ES yesterday. I just want to have a look at the VS setup, a volume spike setup. So let's do a quick review of what the VS setup is. If I basically use our training mode and I jump back to just before this VS setup here, you can see we had a fairly important high earlier in the day. Can you see that? If I just put a high tag on that, that's a fairly important high. So what happens with the VS setup? Well, if I move forward one bar, can you see how this bar here, if I look at our VS or volume spike indicator, it shows there was unusually high volume on this bar that had broken through this important high. In other words, most amateur traders here would see this as a break to new highs on high volume, and therefore the market's going to carry on going up. But if we place our DP off this level here, remember these are leading indicators, they're on the chart in advance. Let's see what happens the next bar. If we go forward, you can see that the market failed to follow through. In other words, after the market had made a break to a new high, it basically fails to follow through and gives us a red sell bar. In other words, the market looks like it's faking out. In other words, it's not carrying out to new highs. If the market did carry on to new highs, then this volume in the previous bar here would have probably been buying, and that would have pushed the market higher. But because it is not carrying up to new highs, this high volume here and this red bar here in the volume indicates that this volume here is actually selling by professionals. In other words, what they're doing is faking out the amateurs. What this means is that if I then place the analysis on, we then are looking for a potential reversal in the opposite direction. If I now move forward, you can see the market came down, took you into a short trade, and if I turn trading mode off, you can see the market did indeed go right the way down to its first target off a nice, quite big move. So what the VS setup is trying to capture is a fake out or a failed break to new highs or new lows. So what makes a good VS setup, and why is this setup here better than the previous one? They both look to have made money, they both look to have been profitable. So what's the difference? Well, as we've seen, this VS setup here was a failure to follow through above the previous major high, which was this one here. So in other words, we're breaching and failing at an important psychological level. In other words, a major high or low. The more important the high or low the setup appears around or fails at, then the better. This particular VS was only a failure to move above this high here. So I place the high tag on, it's only on this one here. Can you see that? So the high volume bar moved through this high, which was not as important as this one. Therefore, this VS setup, although it worked out in this particular case, was not as good as this previous one here. So this is what we're looking for in our VS setups. We're looking for the VS setup to come in and be basically a test or a reversal in and around the failure to move through an important psychological high or low. In other words, in this particular example, this high here, which was, as you can see, a pretty important psychological level before the reversal came in. So this is a good example of two potential VS setups, of which we can see this one was the better one because it made the failure in and around the important psychological high here. And as you can see, if I now place the analysis on, right mouse click, do analysis, that turned out to be a very good trade indeed. VS setups are normally quite good because they are in the direction of the professional money. In other words, the professionals here were now positioning short, getting the amateurs to be on the wrong side of them, so when they move the market in the opposite direction, you normally get a sharp move in the opposite direction. That's why these VS setups are quite good, because when they work out, normally the profits are large, but not just large in dollars, they're large in relation to the initial risk. And see, here's a great example, whereas this profit here was approximately 6.4 times greater than the initial risk. So hopefully this has been a good video showing a bit more detail on our VS or volume spike setup that we have in MTPredictor 8, and we also have this in our NinjaTrader add-ons for NinjaTrader 8 and NinjaTrader 7 as well.